Hi friends, welcome back to my channel, and in today's video I have some horror recommendations for you. First up, we have Nettle and Bone. Now, this is what I would more consider a dark fantasy, but this is essentially about a woman who is attempting to save her sister from an abusive marriage, and she enlists the help of a woman called the Dust Wife to figure out how to get rid of him because he is a prince of a pretty influential country that has a large impact on how her country is run. And they go on this adventure together and they pick up some random stragglers. This is a pretty dark story. It's more of a grim, dark fantasy than a straight up horror book, but there is a bone dog. There's a dog literally made of bones, and you're encountering some horrific elements along the way. If you are a fan of like grim fairy tales, you will really enjoy this story. Next up, we have The Girl Next Door. This is a fictionalized story of the Sylvia Likens case. If you are familiar with this case, if you are not, I would definitely recommend you checking it out. It is it's a rough one, and Sylvia Likens deserves to be remembered, but this is essentially from the point of view of a boy that participated in the torture and death of a young girl named Meg, who I believe is his cousin in this one, if I'm not mistaken, or the cousin of someone in his neighborhood. And you are following the descent of her torture and eventual death. This does involve some very dark things. The actual case with Sylvia Likens involves some very heavy sexual abuse and very heavy torture, including carving things into her stomach, forcing her to eat feces, things just very bad altogether, breaking bones, just very tough stuff. And this is probably the hardest thing for me to read on this list. One of the hardest horrors that I've ever read, just because in particular something about this story, it has stuck with me since I watched the movie with Elliot Page, and the story itself, the true crime case, all of it has stuck with me. I've read multiple books about it, and in particular this fiction story just painted it in a different light because you're in the head of a boy who participated, and it's hard to discern your feelings about his participation in it. So definitely a hard one. If you are at all triggered by any forms of abuse, torture, anything like that, I would say avoid this one, but it's very good if you can stomach it. Next up, we have The Fear. This is a pretty short story. It's about two women who are married and they move to this small town, and the pandemic hits and they are forced to stay in the apartment together, and they both sort of go through this transformation emotionally. They both get very paranoid about different things, and they are afraid that the people in their town will discover that they are wife and wife, and what the implication on their lives will be if it's discovered. And this is an incredibly claustrophobic feeling read. It's incredibly suffocating. It hits all of the notes of the real pandemic, in addition to fear around people's reactions to gay relationships. There are instances of violence against the couple in this book, and it gets quite suffocating. Next up, I'm going to talk about two of these in tandem because they are by the same author, and I recommend both of them equally. Just it kind of depends on what you're looking for. So the first one is My Heart is a Chainsaw. Now, this is a much slower horror story. You don't really know whether it's all in her head or if it's real, or if it's, you know, you just don't know, and it's very slow. And it's about a girl who believes that there is a slasher going on in her town, and she's trying to convince everybody of it. And then we have The Night of the Mannequins, which is much shorter, and this is the story of a group of kids who use a mannequin that they found in a department store to kind of prank each other, and then one day, as their last prank before they graduate. They prank people at a theater, and then things start to go wrong with the mannequin, and you don't know if it's real, if it's in the main character's head. And both of these are very, very good. Stephen Graham Jones is so good at the apprehension of the believability, the feelings of not being able to figure something out, and just the fear of like what's going to happen. And then the last recommendation that I have for you is A Dowry of Blood. This is another very slow story. This is Dracula's Brides, and this is the story of a woman who is in an abusive relationship with Dracula. He takes on many other brides, and it's a slow descent. I wouldn't say there isn't a lot of overt vampire elements in it, meaning like a lot of blood and gore and things like that, but it's more about this abusive relationship and the dynamic that it calls forth. So those are the horror recommendations that I have for you. Let me know down in the comments some of the recommendations you have for me. I would love to hear it. If you are looking for more content from me, you can check out my Instagram, my podcast Instagram, and check out my podcast on all your favorite streaming platforms. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in my next one.